Kynvi, and welcome to day 29 of Kate Bowler and Jessica Richie's readings from Good Enough Lent. This is called The Burden of Love. Why is it that grief feels so much like fear? That's a question you don't expect an author like C.S. Lewis to be asking, especially if you've read his many children's books, where good always wins. In his Narnia tales, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the evil white witch is overpowered by the untamable Aslan. But in A Grief Observed, Lewis allows himself to ask the questions poured from the deepest parts of his pain. Two things had suddenly collided in his life. Just as he realized he was in love with his friend Joy, he was about to lose her. Their deep intellectual friendship became almost incandescent with love. As Joy's son later described, they seemed to walk together within a glow of their own making. But as they were declaring their love and exchanging their vows, Joy was diagnosed with terminal cancer. They would have only 3 years of happiness and sorrow together. Grief and love had created the space that they had inhabited together, a space that Lewis now had to occupy alone. He writes, "I'm not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. The same fluttering in the stomach, the same restlessness." He describes his ache as a kind of suspense. So many habits, so many outcomes stopped in mid-air. A world he had loved was impossible now because of what had changed. Lewis tried to draw a map of what was happening, first to understand it himself, and then perhaps to help others experiencing the same bewildering reality of love lost. But what Lewis discovered was not a map, not even a state of being, but a process. Grief couldn't be charted because it couldn't be pinned down. It didn't need a map, but rather a history. There was something new to be described every day. But not controlled. Oh no, grief has a mind of its own. Lewis explained how loss leads you down deep ravines that descend in winding circles. It brings you to eerily normal spaces where it seems you can breathe again, like you always did. But then suddenly you're crying like you're 8 years old. Then, without any warning, it takes your hand and settles you silently into something like joy made holy, wordless, indefinable, more real than your memories somehow. There is nothing we can do with suffering except to suffer it, says Lewis. When we have lost someone, advice from other people can sound like a lot of white noise. She's in a better place. At least he's not suffering anymore. A veil seems to descend between the grief-stricken and everybody else in the normal world. It makes us yearn for communities who carve out space for mourning, like the Jewish custom of sitting Shiva, where friends and family gather for 7 days. Or how people in Greece and Portugal encourage widows to wear black for months, creating a reminder for others of their loss. We all need a little bit of permission to allow ourselves time and space to feel the weight of loss and move through it in our own way. So, my dears, what can then be said of grief except that it is the burden of love. It can't be defined or drawn, only suffered. But what must be said, what must be given, is the permission to feel it, all of it, not as a state, but as a process. No one can tell you what that process must be for you just now. So gently, gently, let it lead you through. And a blessing for when you're in grief. Blessed are you, dear one, in that place you don't recognize, where the landscape feels hostile and you are fumbling around in the darkness. Everything feels wrong because something important has died or someone is now gone. That one who filled the space that was beautiful and meaningful. How can the world continue to spin when mine has stopped? Blessed are you, dear heart, grieving that which feels irreplaceable. And you're right to think so. Don't let anyone place upon you any other truth, but know this utterly. Blessed are you under the burden of all that love, because bearing it along with you is the faithful path for you to walk now. And even if you take a break and cook breakfast, or buy flowers, or laugh at a silly joke, it isn't breaking faith. It's the rest that pays tribute in its own way. It's the replenishment that is needed in order to continue to press on and through and meet all the landmarks that tell you things are not the same. And you remember all over again, and it is still wrong. Blessed are you, dear, dear one, doing this holy work of suffering that must be suffered, of grieving what has been lost, of knowing the unthinkable truth that must be known. This grief can make you feel on the other side of the glass from the world around you, a force field separating your different realities. Yet, blessed are you in your reality, for yours is the one most seen by God, who breathes compassion upon you, even now, who has walked this path and who leans toward you, gathering you up in the arms of love. Rest now, dear one, rest. You are not alone. Amen.